The studio lights inside the late-night theater glowed with their usual polished warmth, the kind that made everything feel slightly unreal. Cameras hummed, producers whispered through headsets, and the crowd buzzed with the easy excitement that always floated through the room before a taping. It was supposed to be just another night of jokes, monologues, and playful jabs at politics. Nothing unusual, nothing historic, but the energy shifted the moment Jimmy Kimmel walked onto the stage. The applause thundered as always, but those close enough to see his face noticed something different. His smile was there, but it was tight, almost cautious. The kind of smile someone wears when they're about to step onto thin ice and they know the world is watching. That he began with the usual routine. Quick jokes about headlines, playful remarks about Washington, a few harmless digs at celebrities. The audience laughed easily. Yet underneath the rhythm of punchlines there was tension, like the quiet rumble before a storm. Then he paused. He leaned on the desk, looking directly into the camera. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "a story lands on your desk that you don't quite believe at first." The crowd shifted in their seats. The tone had changed completely. "Tonight," he continued, "we received documents that, if they're real, raise some very serious questions." Somewhere backstage, a producer swallowed hard. Across the country, televisions flickered in living rooms, restaurants, and hotel bars. The words began spreading across social media before the sentence even finished, and inside a quiet residence in Florida, Melania Trump looked up from her phone. The room was silent except for the faint sound of the television. Donald Trump sat across the room, scrolling through his own feed, half listening to the show. Late-night hosts had been talking about him for years. Usually, it was noise, jokes, headlines, commentary. But this sounded different. On screen, Jimmy Kimmel reached under his desk and lifted a thin folder. "I want to be very clear," he said carefully. "We have not independently verified everything in here. But these papers appear to reference a file connected to the late financier Jeffrey Epstein." The audience murmured that Trump's head snapped up toward the television, that Melania's eyes narrowed. Kimmel continued speaking, his tone calm but deliberate. He described how the documents had reportedly surfaced through a source connected to investigative reporters. According to the papers, they hinted at a collection of records, communications, travel logs, and personal notes that had never fully entered the public spotlight. He didn't accuse anyone outright, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. The camera cut to the audience, faces frozen somewhere between curiosity and shock. Back in Florida, Trump stood up slowly. "What is this nonsense?" he muttered. Melania didn't respond right away. She was staring at the screen with an intensity that made the room feel colder. The host continued. "These files," Kimmel said, tapping the folder lightly, "mentioned several powerful names. Some you'd expect, some you probably wouldn't." A dramatic pause followed. "And one of those names," he added, "appears to be Donald Trump." The audience gasped, in the Florida residence. Trump's voice erupted instantly. "This is ridiculous." But Melania wasn't looking at him anymore. Her attention remained locked on the television. Kimmel spoke carefully, repeating that the authenticity of the documents still needed verification. He read a short excerpt describing a meeting referenced in the papers. Nothing explicit, nothing criminal, but enough to spark a storm of speculation. And speculation moves faster than truth. Within seconds, phones across the world lit up. Clips spread online like wildfire. Commentators began arguing in real time. Some dismissed the claim as sensational television. Others demanded immediate investigation. In the living room, Melania finally spoke. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Donald," she said slowly, "what is this file?" Trump waved a hand dismissively. "It's garbage," he said. "Late-night TV nonsense. They make things up." But Melania's eyes didn't move. The silence between them stretched for several long seconds. On the television, Jimmy Kimmel was finishing his segment, reminding viewers again that the documents had not yet been authenticated and that journalists were working to verify them. But the damage, or the curiosity, had already been done. The internet was exploding. Melania stood up from the couch. Her expression had hardened into something sharp and unyielding. "Turn it off," she said. Trump grabbed the remote and muted the screen. The room fell quiet. But outside that quiet room, the storm had already begun. Within an hour, the story had grown beyond the walls of a television studio. Newsrooms across the country scrambled to confirm the origin of the documents. Some networks dismissed the segment as speculation. Others treated it as a developing story. Social media turned into a battlefield of theories, accusations, and defenses that late-night television had accidentally ignited a global firestorm. Inside the residence, the silence between Donald and Melania Trump had become unbearable. Melania stood near the window, arms folded tightly. "You knew about this?" she asked without turning around. Trump shook his head. "There is nothing to know," he said sharply. "They take old rumors, twist them, put them on television." But Melania had spent years in the spotlight. She understood media storms better than most people. She knew how quickly stories could spiral out of control, especially when they involved powerful names and mysterious files. And tonight felt different. She turned slowly. "Then explain why they have documents." Trump hesitated. Only for a second, but she noticed, across the country, Jimmy Kimmel had already left the stage. The taping was over. Backstage, producers were staring at their phones as headlines multiplied by the minute. Some congratulated him for bold television. Others warned that the fallout could be enormous. Kimmel himself looked uneasy. He had emphasized repeatedly that the documents were unverified, but in the modern media world, disclaimers often traveled much slower than the story itself. Meanwhile, reporters began contacting lawyers, former investigators, and anyone who might know something about the rumored file. Most had never heard of it, that a few refused to comment. And that silence only made the mystery larger. Back in Florida, Melania picked up her phone. Messages were pouring in. Friends, reporters, acquaintances from around the world asking the same question. Is it true? She placed the phone down carefully. Her voice rose for the first time that night. "You should have told me if there was anything like this." "There isn't," Trump insisted, but the tension in his voice betrayed how quickly the situation was spiraling. Outside, cameras were already gathering at the gates. News vans arrived like migrating birds sensing a storm. Melania looked toward the dark window where flashes of light flickered in the distance. "This will not disappear," she said quietly. Trump paced across the room, muttering about lawsuits, media bias, and television ratings. His anger filled the air, but beneath it was something else. Uncertainty. Because rumors are unpredictable, they grow in the spaces where facts are missing. Across the internet, millions of viewers replayed the clip of Jimmy Kimmel holding the folder. Some believed it was a bombshell revelation. Others believed it was a dramatic stunt. But almost everyone was watching. In the quiet room, Melania finally spoke again. "If these papers are fake," she said, "prove it." Trump stopped pacing. The challenge hung in the air. Outside the gates, reporters shouted questions that no one answered. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel sat alone in his office, staring at the same clip everyone else was watching. The moment he lifted the folder and unknowingly launched a global frenzy. He exhaled slowly. That late-night comedy was supposed to end with laughter. Tonight it had ended with something far more complicated. And as the world waited for answers, the question that lingered everywhere was the same one Melania had asked hours earlier.